1 month ago, Barcelona were on top of the world. They had just beaten both Bayern Munich and Real Madrid, they were comfortably on top of La Liga, they played beautiful attacking football. I mean, the fans got to see what they expected from a club like Barcelona. People were finally considering Barcelona as one of the best teams in the world again. And it felt as if this season was going to be Barcelona's redemption season. But we're now only 1 month later, and Barcelona just come off the back of another loss in La Liga. In the latest 3 La Liga games, Barcelona have only managed to get 1 single point out of 9. It is just weird how things have changed so quickly, and it's hard to really understand why, but in this video we'll try to take a look at the reasons behind Barcelona's struggles. So let's just get right to it. First of all, Barcelona are too dependent on certain players. I'm talking about Lamine Yamal, Robert Lewandowski, Marc Asado, and Alejandro Balde. Barcelona don't have the squad depth to replace these players, and if one of them isn't on the pitch, you immediately see a difference. If Lamine Yamal isn't on there, Barcelona obviously lose arguably their best player. Lamine Yamal's sheer individual class has often made a difference for Barcelona in September and October, and without him, they might not have won as many games as they now did. So when you lose him, you lose that spark of brilliance, but it's not just that, because you also need to replace him with someone. The logical option is to replace him with Rafinha, since Rafinha can also play at right wing. The problem with that though is that makes you lose the best version of Rafinha. Rafinha is at his best when he's making runs from that left wing position. That's how he's played most of his games under Hansi Flick, that's how he was at his best under Xavi as well if you remember that PSG game, and when he's playing at right wing, he's not really the same. He gets pushed into more of a playmaker role, which is something that he's not bad at by any means, but it doesn't get the best out of him. You saw this very well against Las Palmas. Rafinha was actually not good in the first half, probably because he was playing at right wing, but when Lamine Yamal came on in the second half, Rafinha played at his original position again, being that roaming player in attack, and it suddenly made him play better. Long story short, Barcelona just don't have an all-out backup player for Lamine Yamal, and putting Rafinha on the right isn't really an option, because then you lose the best version of Rafinha. Apart from Lamine Yamal, some other players are also too irreplaceable, one of which is Robert Lewandowski. Barcelona don't actually have an all-out backup number 9. You can tell me what you want about Pau Victor, Ferran Torres or even Ansu Fati, but at the end of the day, all 3 of them can play in any position in attack, and none of them is a pure striker, and that is the kind of player that Lewandowski is. Lewandowski hasn't been injured or suspended so far, which is why we've not really seen what kind of issue this is, but if he would ever get injured, Barcelona have a big problem. None of the players on the bench have the same profile as Lewandowski, and what's funny is that I think that someone like Luc de Jong as a Lewandowski backup would really help Barcelona. From all players in Barcelona's attack, I think that Rafinha might actually be the most replaceable. Pau Victor, Ferran Torres and Ansu Fati, they can all play as that dynamic player coming from the left, and I think that for all of them, it's actually the ideal role. So just realize that for a moment. Barcelona have 3 backup attackers, and all of them ideally play in that left wing role. There's no real backup for Lewandowski or for Lamine Yamal, and that's problematic. But there are more players that Barcelona are too reliant on, because Marc Asado is also one of those players that we mentioned at the start. Marc Asado is Barcelona's only available defensive midfielder right now. Hansi Flick's midfield is obviously a double pivot, and there's no pure single pivot in there, but still, you do need a player in there with the profile of a single pivot to recover balls, to be at the right place at the right time, and to dictate the pace of the game. That's something that only Marc Asado can really do. Frenkie de Jong and Gavi don't have the same level of positioning as Marc Asado, and they're both more suited to that other role that Pedri is usually playing in. Of course, Barcelona technically have a backup option from Marc Asado with Marc Bernal. At the start of the season, Marc Bernal was even in front of Marc Asado in Hansi Flick's pecking order, but as he's now injured for the rest of the season, Barcelona have a problem whenever Marc Asado is not on that pitch anymore. A lot of you would probably say that Pedri is also irreplaceable, but both Gavi and Frenkie de Jong also fit that role really well, and if you would put them there next to Marc Asado, they would impress a lot of people probably. But don't get me wrong, Pedri is still Barcelona's best option in there, and he's undoubtedly Barcelona's best midfielder all around. There's just 2 really solid backup options for him. Lastly, Alejandro Balde is also too irreplaceable. Barcelona don't have a backup left back with the same kind of pace and dribbling as Balde. Gerard Martin is way more conservative and doesn't offer you the same threat in attack, whereas Hector Fort is at his best as a right back. Without Alejandro Balde, Barcelona are simply not at their full strength. So in general, there's 4 players in there that Barcelona really rely on too much. Lamine Yamal, Robert Lewandowski, Marc Asado and Alejandro Balde. So if Barcelona have been falling off, then it is also because of the absence of players like them. But apart from that, another problem has been Barcelona's lack of sharpness in some games. Barcelona under Hansi Flick are at their best when they're playing at high intensity, with a high press that works really effectively and with rapid ball circulation. But in some recent games, we've seen Barcelona actually lack that kind of energy on the pitch, and without an effective high press or fast combinations in attack, Barcelona lose their fangs. But the big question is of course why they've actually lacked that intensity in some games. One of the reasons why is probably just fatigue. I mean, after the accumulation of games, it's normal that it's harder after a while to play with the same kind of energy. Another reason might be that Barcelona were probably not with their feet on the ground anymore after those wins against Bayern Munich and Real Madrid. As a consequence, they lacked perseverance, and they played against teams that did have that perseverance, and well, when that happens, you usually lose. The matter of fact is that without that sharpness, this Barcelona team are just nowhere, and I hope that Hansi Flick can restore it as quickly as possible. We did see it again against Brest, but not as much against Las Palmas, so it's a matter of getting that intensity back for once and for all. Lastly, Barcelona also have a young core of players, which automatically means that they lack experience. There's so many players that are only in their first or second professional season right now. And sometimes that means that you'll see them make mistakes just because they're not that familiar with La Liga level football. Sergi Dominguez, Gerard Martin, Hector Force, those are the kind of players I'm talking about. And it's just normal that they need some time to fully adapt to first team football. In the end, that's something that you just cannot avoid, and it's just a part of football really, especially when you've got such a young core of players. So Barcelona's main weaknesses are their dependency on some players, their lack of sharpness in some games, and also their lack of experience maybe. But to better understand this, it would actually be really interesting to take a look at all of Barcelona's bad games in La Liga and to see how these weaknesses cost them the game. First of all, there's actually the game earlier this season against Osasuna. Barcelona lost that game 4-2 away from home, but why? Well, first of all, Lamine Yamal and Marc Casado both weren't in the starting lineup and even Rafinha wasn't there. So in attack, Barcelona lacked creativity without Lamine Yamal, just as expected, while in midfield they had less control without Marc Casado, which made it easier for Osasuna to get control over the game and create chances. On top of that, Sergi Dominguez committed some crucial errors that cost Barcelona the game. Remember, a lack of experience was also one of Barcelona's weaknesses, and in this game it might have been the reason for their loss. This was the first ever game that Sergi Dominguez started for Barcelona, so it is fair to point at his lack of experience as a reason for his mistakes. Lastly, Barcelona also lacked sharpness in that game against Osasuna. They just came off the back of a whole sequence of games, and some players might have been tired, resulting in them playing with less intensity. So overall, the Osasuna loss was really a consequence of all of Barcelona's weaknesses. They weren't able to replace Lamine Yamal and Marc Casado, Sergi Dominguez lacked experience, and Barcelona as a whole lacked sharpness. Then there is the Real Sociedad game that Barcelona lost 1-0 away from home. First of all, Lamine Yamal wasn't in the team, so again, Barcelona automatically didn't have the same creativity in attack. Rafinha played in his role and he was actually good, but even he doesn't offer you the same kind of genius spark that Lamine Yamal has. Apart from that, I think that a lack of sharpness was the main reason that Barcelona lost that game. Intensity-wise, this was arguably Barcelona's worst game of the season, and there is a very good reason for that. This was their last game before the international break. Barcelona had already played Sevilla, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Espanyol and Red Star Belgrade before that, and you could see that some players just weren't at their usual level. Also, like we already said, Barcelona were not with their feet on the ground anymore after those wins against Bayern Munich and Real Madrid, and it was just a matter of time before they were going to encounter a team good enough to punish that. Real Sociedad ended up being that team, and they were really good that day as well. Then there is the Celta game that ended in a 2-2 draw. Again, there was no Lamine Yamal and also no Alejandro Balde. Just as expected, that meant that Barcelona lacked some creativity in attack. Without Alejandro Balde, they also lacked that pace at the left. On top of that, there is also the lack of experience. Gerard Martin didn't play well and looked overwhelmed, and Marc Casado got a red card that he might have not gotten if he would have been more experienced. Now, Marc Casado is absolutely one of Barcelona's most important players, and has been astonishing this season, but in that one moment where he got a second yellow, he did commit a crucial mistake. Because he is that important, like we already said, Barcelona lacks stability in midfield without him, and Celta's 2 goals both came after he got his red cards. Finally, again, Barcelona also lacked sharpness in this game. I mean, just look at Jules Koundé's mistake during Celta's first goal. It really just felt as if Barcelona needed a wake-up call. So against Brest in the Champions League, they did react. They played with enough sharpness and intensity to win without needing Lamine Yamal. And honestly, I personally thought that Barcelona were up and running again after that game against Brest, but against Las Palmas we again saw a very average performance. Why in the hell did Barcelona lose against Las Palmas? Well, first of all, Lamine Yamal wasn't there in the first half, and even when he came on in the second, it seemed like he had to regain his match rhythm again. Apart from that, Marc Casado wasn't on the pitch, and that was obvious. Gavi kinda played in that role now, but he doesn't have the same kind of natural instinct to play as that deep midfielder. Barcelona didn't have the same control over the midfield, and especially defensively, there were often too many open spaces for Las Palmas to exploit. Look, Gavi does have the tackling and interception qualities of Marc Casado, but he's not as good as him in terms of positioning. Marc Casado does a great job at keeping the midfield solid and narrow while defending, and nobody at Barcelona is as good as him when it comes to that. If you take a look at Las Palmas' first goal for example, there was just way too much space in midfield for them to use. And with Marc Casado, I don't know if that would have been the case. When we're talking about Las Palmas' second goal, we might have to point the finger at Hector Force's lack of experience. He should have probably put Fabio Silva in an offside position, and if Pau Cubarsí would have been in his place, that's probably what would have happened. But because Hector Ford isn't as experienced as many of the main defenders, that's the kind of mistakes that he risks making. That doesn't mean that he's bad in any way, it's just a small detail that makes a difference. In terms of sharpness, Barcelona were actually quite okay in this game, at least compared to the games against Celta and Real Sociedad. They created more chances and conceded less. Las Palmas were just really efficient, and Barcelona just had some bad luck in front of goal as well. So overall, it is mainly Barcelona's dependency on certain players, their lack of sharpness in some games, and also their lack of experience in some moments that have cost them points in La Liga this season. But with Lamine Yamal returning and with the important games coming up, I'm confident that we will see Barcelona bounce back for good in the coming weeks. So that was it for today's video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and feel free to share your own opinion in the comments down below. And of course, Força Barça, and have a good day.